Welcome to Editorials with Eddie. I'm Eddie. This month, we are looking at an editorial from Developmental Medicine and Child Neurology, Zen and the Art of Clinical Discourse. What is it about? Let's find out on Editorials with Eddie. My first guest is a French philosopher who will talk to us about discourse, Michel Foucault. Bonjour, Eddie. Thank you for inviting me on your show. You don't sound French. I'm a cartoon. We all sound the same. Okay, so do you know about discourse? It was the topic of my inaugural lecture at the College of France in 1970. Discourse would be described as a mechanism for ordering knowledge. It defines what can be said and who can say it. Discourse is essential for communication, but is also controlling. It is both productive and restrictive. Can you give me an example of a discourse? The journal you mentioned is a good example. It provides a space where ideas and findings can be expressed and discussed in a way which is considered acceptable within the wider clinical discourse. Sorry, Michelle, could you go over that again? You could think of discourse as a framework within which statements have a meaning and which establishes who is allowed to make these statements. So discourse involves restrictions. Yes, in my lecture I said, we must conceive discourse as a violence which we do to things, or in any case as a practice which we impose on them. And it is in this practice that the events of discourse find the principle of their regularity. This is getting a bit complicated. We still need to talk about Deleuze and his problematic fields. I brought Gilles Deleuze along with me. Hi Gilles, thank you for joining the discussion. Can you explain your ideas about problematic fields and solutions? Merci, Eddie. I can give the example of a tree. We can view a tree as a static and fixed object, or we can consider it as the changing outcome of interacting factors including growth, availability of water, nutrients, and sunlight. We could think of these factors as forming a problematic field. And we can see the tree as a solution emerging from this problematic field. That is interesting, but is it relevant to the discourse which Michel said was represented in the journal? Well, Eddie, it can explain how development occurs. When you start walking, for instance, that will be a good example of a solution emerging from a problematic field. I never thought of myself as a solution. But where does Zen come into all this? Zen Buddhism offers a similar way of seeing things. Maybe you could discuss this with a Zen master. Good idea. I've invited a Zen master to join us. Hello, Dogen. Hello, Eddie, and thank you for inviting me to join you. The editorial opens with the sentence, "Where does my fist go when I open my hand?" This sentence helps us understand how we mistakenly think of things as static independent entities, rather than as interlinked dynamic processes as discussed by Gilles. Zen also helps us understand that the language underlying discourse is a representation of reality, rather than reality itself. We say that words are like a finger pointing at the moon. One must not mistake the finger for the moon. This is interesting but also complicated. We seem to need discourse, but we have to be cautious about using it. How should we approach it? There's a Zen poem by Ryokan which states, "Relying upon a finger, we see the moon." relying upon the moon, we understand the finger. We need to see the finger and the moon. We need to see the discourse and the reality which discourse allows us to discuss. How can we be conscious of both at the same time? Maybe I can help. I'm David Foster Wallace. I began a speech to a graduating class with a story. There are these two young fish swimming along, and they happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way, who nods at them and says, "Morning boys, how's the water?" The two young fish swim on for a bit, and then eventually one of them looks over at the other and goes, "What the hell is water?" The point of the fish story is that the most obvious, important realities are often the ones that are hardest to see and talk about. In a clinical situation, we need to be aware of the limitations of discourse and to be open to what we're experiencing. We have to keep reminding ourselves over and over, this is water, this is water. I might have to think about that for a while. But for now, I would like to thank all my guests and thank you for watching Editorials with Eddie. I hope you all enjoyed it. I have some reading to do.